I am the director of the Joseph Stern Center for Social Responsibility at Marlene Meyerson, JCC Manhattan. And I am so pleased to be here with you this evening. And I'm really excited about the fact that that our speaker and our moderator seem to be so excited to see one another, because it indicates we're going to have a really great conversation. Let me tell you a little bit about both of them, and then we'll get started. We are, and I just want to say, we are also so honored to be co-hosting this program with BJ, and I'm honored to have the privilege of introducing our incredible speaker and moderator. Our moderator, the Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis, is an author, activist, and public theologian. She is the senior minister at the Middle Collegiate Church, a multiracial, welcoming, and inclusive congregation in New York City. Jackie is the author of several books, including her latest, Fierce Love, a bold path to ferocious courage and rule-breaking kindness that can heal the world. Middle Church and Jackie have been featured in media such as The Today Show, The Takeaway, and in the New York Times. Her podcasts include Love, Period, which is produced by the Center for Action and Contemplation, and The Four, a fearsome faith foursome talking about Black love, love, power, and joy, with Otis Moss III, Lisa Sharon Harper, and Michael Ray Matthews. Our speaker, Majora Carter, is a MacArthur Fellow, Peabody Award broadcaster, and has 7 honorary PhDs, in addition to accolades from organizations as diverse as the Center for American Progress, News Corps, the Eleanor Roosevelt Society, Goldman Sachs, Business Insider, and the Municipal Arts Society, among many others. She is a real estate developer and consultant who still lives in the South Bronx neighborhood where she grew up, and is also the owner of Boogie Down Grind, which was named Best Cafe in New York City by Time Out New York in 2021. Majora is quoted on the walls of the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. The quote is, "You don't have to move out of your neighborhood to live in a better one," which is also the subtitle of her new book that we will be hearing about this evening. Majora, Reverend Jackie, we are so pleased to have you with us. Now I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Thanks, everyone. Majora! Hello, Jackie! I'm so glad to be with you tonight.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I can't believe you're doing this. I'm
so proud
that we're doing this. Yay!
Like, what? So I had to tip out of y'all the intense collegiate church. What are we going to do about rebuilding Middle Church's building meeting to get here? So I'm so sorry I was a couple minutes late, but I was like, y'all, I got to go. Got to go be with Majora tonight.
Yes. And just another thing I wanted to add, I'm also a member of Middle Church. So
yes,
thank you. Yes. Add that to my bio.
But let me just say, you all hosting this conversation, I'm conscious of the world. I'm going to just say the world on fire with divisiveness and racial animus and toxic politics and bad manners and the pounding of human life, right, in more than one theater of war around the country. We're focused on Ukraine, but also, right, Yemen, right, also. So to talk about neighborhoods and to talk about community with someone as bright and sparkly and amazing as Majora is my deep pleasure. And Majora, I just want to say, who are you? I mean, let's start there. How in the world, with your South Bronx self, did you get to be you? Could you tell us? Because I believe there's a big power in stories. So tell us, just give us and then give us a little how you got to be you.
I mean, well, it's the God in me, who just birthed it, but we'll go from there and then winnow down into it. I mean, look, I'm a child of the burning Bronx. I still live in a community, that was written off. Yes. I internalized so much of that, despite the fact that I was certainly given certain gifts and, and felt them and acted on them. I was a good writer. I was, very creative. I was pretty smart, and I acted on it, but
Yeah.
there were still all sorts of issues around me. I mean, literally landlords were torching their buildings. And this was like an era of severe, one of the many years of financial disinvestment, in our country, that definitely also overburdened, poor communities of color, like the one that I grew up in. But mine, for some reason, captured the imagination of journalists and media. And we were just like plastered over the news. And so I grew up watching that and feeling a deep shame about being from a place that was considered, nothing more than, pimps and pushers and prostitutes. But then coming into my own, and realizing that there was all sorts of systemic things that got in the way of anyone from our community, like seeing themselves clearly just because we could, because we were all fearfully and wonderfully made. And when I did that, that's when I realized, oh no, I want to be a part of actually helping my community see itself as beautiful as we were intended to be.
Yes. Right? Yes. And Majora, like all over the world, all over the world, especially girl children, but children, brown children, Jewish children, like children who would be in the kind of pimps and prostitutes or burnt out shell of neighborhoods, and they wouldn't have, and they would be smart and poetic and gifted, but somehow some ingredient wouldn't come into their souls or to their psyches. So you alluded to faith, and I want you to talk about that some, but also faith and what maybe were three things that came into your body from where to give us a Majora.
Well, interesting. I think it did come to a lot of people, but the thing is, what we're often led to believe, if you're from what I deem now as a low status community, we don't use, underprivileged or just poor or whatever. It's more about literally like how those communities are perceived, and they're perceived, such as that inequality is assumed by people both inside and outside of those communities. And so it's like the nonprofit industrial complex, the government, everybody looking in is just like, those are problems to be solved, but we're never really going to solve them. And the people in them are led to believe that if you do have any kind of, if you're born with a little bit of talent, there's a whole system that's designed to make you think that you need to measure your success by how far you get out.
Okay. Yep.
And and it could come in the form of like, gifted and talented classes, or, different, athletic programs for like the talented ones, or just like opportunities for folks to get out.
Schools. Yeah.
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 And when, and first, when you're in those kind of things, you're just like almost proud, that you've been identified as like a bright one. But then when you really look at it more, like you realize that it's also working to degrade the social fabric of those communities. And then by association, the economic fabric and even the environmental. And because those communities are designed in one way to literally sort of be dependent, on the systems that are benefiting from the poverty that's there, from the environmental abuses that are there, from the lack of economic, wealth creation and growth. And that's when you go, oh, that's really horrifying. And what can we do to create, much more value, for the people that are there to see their own value? Yeah.
So wise. I mean, I hear you saying it, and it makes me think about the ways that the social safety networks, the gifted and talented, I was in a program called Inroads. Did you know that program? Like, let's go let's get the shiny Black people and let them go. And they're going to get grants for having the shiny Black people go but they're not necessarily, mostly not designed to change the systems of structure, the economic base, the way we value nanas and titis and mamas and daddies.
Yes.
Like, all of that is missing. You take a child and you make them stand up and out, but we don't.
And up and out.
Up and out.
Yes.
Up and
wow.
out. Ooh,
Mm.
Up and Out. That's the next book. Let's write that one
Yeah.
together.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I have to say that I've been so fascinated with your book, Majora, but also like I'm gonna go, Lin-Manuel Miranda, who's like, I'm gonna make you know that, Inwood and this part of the city is beautiful. There is a kind of literary, artistic renaissance or celebration of communities that wouldn't have that celebration but for voices like yours or Lin-Manuel's, or I'm thinking of other authors, even back to Gloria Naylor, like just people who say, oh, look here and see,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? See this. Can you just give us a Bronx story? If those who haven't read your book, like give us a Bronx story that goes.
Yeah. So, I talk early on in the book because, again, yes, I might have seen my neighborhood like showcased on the nightly news as like the worst place in the world. But my experience of it was actually quite wonderful in many, many ways. So there's a scene where I talk about just walking home from school, as I did, 5 times a week. And there was a woman who lived on the first floor of an apartment, and she had these pendulous breasts that she kept encased in a house coat. And she would literally like put her boobs like over her over her arms as she would like lean out her window and like yell at us kids, because I never knew her name. I never saw her from anything other than her boobs and her arms and her head. But she knew all of the kids in the neighborhood, like intimately, like knew how we were doing in school, knew if we were like the pain in the butt kids or the kids who were okay. And, it was just like hilarious to know. It's like, who is this woman? But it was like almost like a running joke amongst like all of our friends. It's like, oh my God, she's gonna see us. And or if something good happened, and she'd like broadcast it. Like when I ended up, I got an honorable mention in Highlight magazine, the children's magazine. She knew about stuff like that. And it was just like, so those were my neighbors. Like it felt like it's a community. I mean, what was horrifying, was that later on the same summer, that building was burnt down. So I never saw Miss House Coat again. The end of the summer, my brother was killed. But throughout all that, like there was a sense of community in our community. So my whole neighborhood mourned my brother, because like he was this beautiful person that people adored, problematic history that he had. And so it was those stories of community that were never told outside of our community. But I needed people to see, like, we all have them, especially in low status communities. And people really are aching, whether or not we can identify it, but there's a longing to want to see our communities do better.
Absolutely.
And especially when we're in them, but we're often led to believe that that's not possible, that you're supposed to, that brain drain is something that we do, as opposed to creating opportunities within our own community so that we can take our best selves and essentially pour forward, this idea that we should be reinvesting like our best selves into our own communities for the benefit of our others. And this book really is, it's my and the work that I do. This is my ministry. This is my ministry. Like I want to do community development in ways that make people feel like they can love up on their community because it loves them back, because we've created the infrastructure that makes people feel like I don't have to move out of my neighborhood to live in a better one. I can create these beautiful nodes of friends and family and places where we can gather that will make and that we could develop opportunities for wealth creation, community building, all that good stuff, so that we're creating, I think, a healthier, more hopeful America.
I love that. I think that I'm a nerd in a few different kinds of ways. Ways I'm a nerd is a psychology nerd. I'm definitely a psychology nerd. When reading your book, Majora, I was thinking about the container that is, the holding environment, if you will, right? That the place that where Mama Super Breast leans out and loves, and the place where your brother's killed and everyone mourns. And this idea Majora, that let's say the globe is one kind of container. And then the particularity of the United States is a kind of container. And then every state, every city, every hamlet, every town, every borough, every barrio is a container. And it has smells, right? And textures and characters are welcome, and, you know, and stories and lore. And I wonder if you would just say a little something about how the Bronx went with you to college, or, you know, how the Bronx went with you, know what I mean? Like you took the container, didn't you, love, and signed you to the places that you went. So just tell us a little bit about what that's like to interject that and take it with you.
Sure. I mean, I took mostly well, I tried to hide it because I was so ashamed, you know, of what I knew, what preceded me, you know, when I would walk into a room and, you know, folks knew I was from the South Bronx, you know, which again, it was captured the imagination, even though it was like we also birthed hip hop, which was also the coolest thing in the world. But still, it was the bad parts that were most, I think, telling, you know, to what folks would see or feel when they saw me. You know, and even I went to Wesleyan University, which is like a very progressive school. There were still, you know, definitely issues with being like a little dark Black girl from the hood, and in particular my hood. And it was the thing that literally made me just go, I tried to hide it. And having that shame associated with me literally like put me on a path to continue to do that. So the idea of actually reclaiming my community was by no stretch of the imagination anything that I wanted to do. The only reason why I ended even up, you know, back after college, and even when going into grad school back in my neighborhood, was because I wanted, you know, I had to go to grad school, or I didn't have to. I got into grad school and wanted to go, and I needed a cheap place to stay, which was my parents' house. And I was like, I can't even like make up, like, you know, I can't make up a story about like, you know, my mysterious background or whatever. It's like, yeah, I was here. And yeah, but it was, again, it was a blessing, you know, to that education and the distance that I did have when I finally did get back. And that's when, you know, I was like struck with the fact that our city and state were planning on building a huge waste facility on our waterfront. And it was that education and that distance that I'd had for many years before that made me realize, oh, like this is happening because we're a poor community of color and thus politically vulnerable. And it made me rethink everything that I thought was true about my neighborhood, and by association, me, that I wasn't this dirty thing that, you know, just because. No, there was a whole system put in place to create the kind of financial inequities, the, you know, the racial, you know, inequities, all of it. And we were just sort of stuck there because there were just these systems put in place. And that's when I realized, well, there was also this system that actually sort of supported folks to move out of places like this.
Yeah.
But then that's when I realized I could pretend I don't see it, or I can like take some of my own gifts, and I wasn't even sure what they were at the time, and do something and actually be a part of the change I wanted to see.
And all of those, I'm going to call them plot points in your story, just for lack of a better word, but all the experiences, Majora, right? All the experiences along the way, including leaving and coming back, in your particular case, gives you the insight, wisdom, gifts, impetus to be the writer of this book and the changer of things.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some like the big hot things. Let's talk about gentrification.
Go on.
Why? What's going on with that? And then maybe to think, because I want to connect it to what is the system doing? What is a gentrified system doing? And how does that relate to poverty maintenance? You know, how can you?
Yeah, I mean, well, gentrification, I want to just put it out there that it's also a product of reurbanization that people who had actually left the cities, whether it was white flight or whatever, want to move back because they are closer to transportation, they are more walkable. And that is an issue. And the fact that we're not creating more supply to meet the demand, that is an issue that nobody really ever wants to talk about, because nobody likes density. And that's a whole other thing that we, like, as we plan and design for our future, we need to acknowledge that, and nobody really wants to. So
That
they just
design
don't.
that human beings want actually some on top of
Yes.
each other.
Yes. And even just have,
Yeah.
even just literally the supply of just even like crappy stuff. It's like, we're not making enough. We're just not. But no one should have to have crappy. No, but I want to be clear about that. And so you've got like baby boomers and millennials who both want the same kind of housing. And then you've got developers who are happy to build it. And then you've got these like sort of like politically isolated communities, many of them of color, almost all of them poor. And yeah, they're like easy to push aside. Totally. So gentrification means that outsiders are coming in order to change a community to suit their own needs. In this case, it's developers who recognize that there are higher, people who can pay more for what they're going to build. And so, yeah, it's like, and if people don't understand the value in the communities that they're leaving, if they have property, they'll sell really quickly. And then renters are just sort of transient and landless and can be pushed out of the way. Whereas reclaiming your community is more about recognizing that there's value already in it, which is the human capital that's there to start. And that we've been led to believe that there's like that there's really not much talent in our community, but this is about creating reasons for them to stay and reinvest economically, socially, as well as spiritually, within our community, so that we like embrace it and want us to be a part of its future. Yeah. Yeah.
And how, like, it seems like to me, the way you're saying it is that the poverty maintenance and the sort of nonprofit industrial complex work against this, lead to another narrative, get up, get out. Just say a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, right. So I'm sorry, I totally forgot to answer that question. So, but the two kinds of real estate development that we generally see in low status communities, one is gentrification, which I think everybody kind of knows what that looks like. The other kind is poverty level economic maintenance, which simply means that billions and billions of philanthropic and also government dollars go into those communities, but they remain economically stagnant. And those billions of dollars come in the forms of subsidies for, very, very low income affordable housing or homeless shelters. It's also in the form of like the multi-billion dollar, pharmaceutical and healthcare industries that literally a good portion of all the zeros on those balance sheets are literally built on the backs of lifestyle related conditions that you find prevalent within low status communities. From diabetes, obesity, heart condition, often related to how those communities are designed and planned. From lack of access to really healthy food to not being able to connect, because the infrastructure doesn't allow you to like walk safely and get exercise. I mean, there's, the stress of living in those places as well also has a serious impact on people's health, environmental issues, all sorts of those things, but again, lots of people are making money off of the poverty that is concentrated in those communities based on the infrastructure that's being built as a result of all those billions of dollars that go into those communities. But the people in those communities, their poverty levels remain the same, especially since the system is also creating this dynamic where if you're born with any kind of talent, you're taught to measure success by how far you get away.
There we go.
So I think I'm wondering, hi Josh, Majora, how intentional, how conscious is the system or the systems of what they're doing? It's a thing, right? It's not like, oh, that's the net result. Oh, right?
It's not an oops. No, it's not an oops. I mean, since the day this country was formed, I mean, there's been whole systems designed in particular to, the racially oppressive systems that, their entitlement programs, for white folks starting from the 1600s on, and, that were denied to people, of color, starting with Black folks, of course, and well, actually starting with Native Americans. And, even though like now we know that those systems actually haven't really helped white people a lot either.
Right.
If you look at, who's the largest victim of gun violence, that there actually there are actually more white people in poverty than there are people of color, but those things don't get translated, I think. But ultimately, I mean, the people who are still doing the worst, are the people of color and other folks in low status communities, period. And so I do think, I mean, obviously, I think it's very intentional. And as someone who's actually tried to, and this is the kind of thing that I sort of lay out in my book, like my personal story is like recognizing that, wait, all relationships are about real estate. And the way our communities develop will inform the health and well-being of our communities from an economic, a social, and an environmental standpoint. So I was like, oh yeah, that's why I want to be a real estate developer.
Yeah.
I mean, I should be, like people like me should be doing this. I mean, it just seemed very natural to me. And then I realized, no, that's not exactly what was expected of someone like me. And it's been a crazy road. Well, I'm still at it. I'm still at it, but it's been really difficult. But what's been amazing, is seeing how, folks are recognizing that, that this little Black chick from the South Bronx can like step up and go like, I can do this, I can be a part of the change I want to see, then maybe I can too. And then also being inspired by people around the country and around the world, actually, who on their own, sort of taken this idea. I mean, I call it a talent retention community development strategy, because we've taken a page out of the business book manual, essentially, and been like, no, we need to keep our star players the same way a business would, and thinking about our community as companies as ways to like create the infrastructure so that we can all benefit from having a great team. Right. But other folks have been doing it around the world. And so I love the idea of being able to sort of highlight some of those stories as well, and just give people an opportunity to recognize that they're not alone in wanting their hometowns to blossom, and they should be something that's fulfilling for them. And that's okay. It's not just okay. I think it's preferable, for people to want to see value in their own community in ways that really meet their own needs.
When I think about what you're saying there, in my book, I do some time on Ubuntu.
Yes.
Yeah. And this kind of interrelatedness of community folks. And I wonder if there's a story that you would tell for those who haven't gotten deep in your book about like a story from outside of your context that really inspires you.
Yeah. So one of them, and I talk about it in the book, is and I found, because it does feel sometimes kind of lonely.
Yeah.
When you're head down and, trying to get stuff done, wherever you are, and then you get a chance to look up and you realize, oh my gosh, and then your whole imagination gets captured by someone else.
Right.
And so I actually totally by accident, found out about this group in Oakland, California, called the EB-PREC, or East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative. And there were this group of folks who wanted to do a cooperative form of restorative economics. And they basically wanted to revive, 7th Street, in West Oakland, which was actually like this really cool kind of hot music spot called Esther's Orbit Room. And it was surrounded by like some old buildings that I think were abandoned for a long time. And they decided they were going to basically use this as an opportunity to buy those buildings cooperatively and teach people how to do that and be like all resident owners. Or there were people who could buy into it and just support it. And then, yes, they had to build a real capital stack. So they actually worked with, an amazing restorative economics group and to actually get the bulk of it. But everybody else, actually paid in a little bit of money to be a cooperative owner. And through that, there are certain rights and privileges, but ultimately they were able to build this. They're in the process of building it right now. This amazing, commercial space, which is the orbit room. And then there's going to be housing, associated with it, and cafes. And so it's this really beautiful, mixed use, project that was literally done out of the spirit of the community to transform itself. And so seeing things like that, it was just like, we're not alone. And, other folks who obviously have been feeling the same way and wanted to just really restore their communities from the inside out. And that's what makes me feel like there's hope.
There is hope. Is there a way to grow that kind of, I just left a meeting with 3 other clergy systems, if you will, not to tell all our business, but we're trying to figure out how to be new together and not be individual for congregation doing the thing, but to really do something collectively. Majora, is there a certain kind of human muscle that we need to be born with or grow, develop to make us to think cooperatively? How do you get there?
This is where my faith really has to kick in because, I really do look at this as my ministry. This is, loving God, like 2 most important things to do: love God, love your neighbor. And you love your neighbor in ways that speak to your neighbor. And so that you see your neighbor. And it's kind of like what you talked about in your book, Fierce Love. It's like when you describe, it was like I actually kind of choked up when I read it, that idea when you were watching your daughter-in-law and your grandbaby, Octavius, and you're watching that like beautiful way that, your daughter was watching, her son, and, and she would show delight, in what, this little baby chewing on his toes was doing. And it was just like one of those like moments where you just realize like, I see you.
Yeah. Yep.
You see them and you're like, not just seeing them, you're responding.
Yes.
For what you've seen and like what their hopes and dreams and aspirations are. Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like in many of our communities, we don't have enough of that, where it's just like, I see you and I want you happy and I'm gonna do what I can to make you happy. And I realize that that's a lot of what this work is. And so if whatever that muscle is, it's really recognizing that the world is like the happiness that I know that I get from watching, the projects that I've built, how people enjoy them and how they can suddenly see themselves in a completely different way because they just didn't know it was possible.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm good. I can sit back and just like that level of surprise. And when you realize that by seeing people and recognizing that they can actually, if you give them the tools to see themselves in a beautiful way, they will.
That's right.
But it's like, it's a little bit of patience, but it's mostly just listening a lot and reacting to that in a way that's going to make them feel like, oh, I'm not that bad.
It's so beautiful the way you speak that now and the way you write that. This idea, one of my favorite rabbis, and I write this in Fierce Love, says, an ethical life is learning how to see, right? So Gabby is seeing Octavius bite his toes and mirroring back, you go, baby, I see you, I got you. You're
so sweet.
Community, and I see you, and yes, you can own this, and yes, we can make this art, make this project together. I think that, I don't know, Majora, I think we're born with that. We're born with that kind of sight. And I think that that life can get us blinded, like life can get us focused only on self or focused only on our tribe or focused on our 5 people. And to think that surviving and thriving is an individual project as opposed to, right? As opposed to like all us together.
Yeah. Yeah. I mentioned there was a scene in my book where I was an activist late in life. I didn't yeah, I wasn't like, I didn't do it in college. I was a grown butt woman and I was tired and I was just like, we just got to get something done. Like, I'm not wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt. I'm just like, who I got to talk to get some stuff done around here. And, you know, and I realized I did have a different way of approaching. And it might, looking back on it, it might have been a little tough to deal with because I was just like, can we just get it done? And but at one point, you know, actually during the time when where I was focusing on transforming this dump into a park, you know, specifically, you know, as a way to show our city that we were more than just like a place where you dump things. Like literally, like I was an artist, so it was like, of course you want to think things like that. And most of my peers, you know, who were in the
Majora,
Yes,
is anybody
yes.
else having weird feedback from Majora right there? Let's give it just a second, love, because what you're saying is so important. It sounded like a Martian came in with you.
Oh,
Yeah, the gift.
that better?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, and so I just, you know, is still there?
Yeah. Hang on one second. What should we do, Kiana?
Majora, I think this is the same issue you were having when we first got on. So whatever you did to fix it then.
Huh, okay, I'm gonna put this back in. Because I didn't hear anything. Is it okay now? Is it better?
No.
Something weird is going on. Wait, let me see if I change this. How's that? Is that good?
Better.
Yeah.
Yes. There we go. Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna see if I can still put my earphones in because is that okay?
Yep, that's good.
Oh, good. Okay, now perfect. Yeah, I gotta check my computer out. I think it's me. Oh, so I think I was saying that I had and so most of my peers were working in education or tenants' rights, and there I was trying to build a transform a dump into a park, and they didn't see the value of it. They were just like, we got real problems, but the best thing in the world was they just left me alone. They were like, just do it on, whatever. And they were really surprised when it actually happened. And they were just like, oh, wait, I see the utility of this all. This is a way to like build community, blah, blah, blah. And
how do you turn a dump into a park, Miss Majora?
oh, yeah, well, patience and vision and really feeling like this was my contribution. I was like, there were definitely other folks who were working on the advocacy thing, but what we were missing was people in our own community actually feeling like our community, there was something worth fighting for. Like we knew what we were fighting against. We had that down pat. It was just like, yeah, the city's like working to build another dump here. But most of us had trouble articulating a vision for what we wanted to see in our own community because no one asked us. So I was like, I heard you talking. I know you guys take your kids outside the neighborhood to have a nice, clean, safe place to play. Like, I know you go away if you want to like just take a walk in some nature around Central Park or whatever park in the north part of the Bronx. So why can't we do this in our own neighborhood?
Mhm.
And, I wasn't looking to do it, but it was an opportunity that opened up. The U.S. Forest Service was giving out grants to, to threatened urban waterways, and the Bronx River is one of them. And I didn't know we had one at the time. I mean, that's not true. I knew I could see the Bronx River on the subway map, but it wasn't like you could get to it. I mean, when you travel through that part of the neighborhood, there was industry all along it. And had it not been for this crazy little big dog that I had that pulled me into what I thought was just a dump, I never would have known that it dead ended at the Bronx River.
Wow.
And it really was this magnificent moment where I was like, oh my goodness, like we could use this to show like how our community can be transformed. This could be the beginning of our community's, revitalization. Like our waterfront revitalization, since our city was hell bent on putting a waste facility on the other side of the neighborhood. It was like, no, we need something that like makes people's heads spin around.
Yes.
And they see something different. And then they'll just go like, huh? And I was right.
I mean, it feels to me that the transformation of space, place, the transformation of place and space is metaphor for transformation of human,
Mm.
right? And body. So like, give me some more on the Let's like, let's think about like that out loud. Like how does it work? What do people see differently when place is different or they
Mm.
participate in place, you know?
It's again, going back to that whole mirroring, that
Mhm.
you, so I just, put out there, like when it reflects back on you
Yes, it does.
when you, I feel like the environment that's around you needs to be beautiful so that it kind of gives you that kind of shine. And if
Yes,
your environment is one that tells you everything about it is ugly and meaningless and hostile and violent, and you will take that in.
Mhm.
So creating opportunities, and they're really just opportunities for people to sort of like get into these spaces, and we call them third spaces, right? It's like an urban planning term for a place that's neither work nor home, but somewhere in the middle that allows people to do community together. And because community, I actually use it as a verb a lot. Community is not just a place, it's actually an activity that, so you need to be able to do community
Yeah.
and behave that way. But you need those places that make you feel good about being in them. Otherwise, how could you let your guard down if you're
Right.
constantly feeling assaulted, by just like, whether it's like, whether it's like lots of garbage on the street, or buildings that are badly made, and lighting that's not good, or the kind of places that like tell you that they don't really want you in them.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Unsafe and dangerous. So, I grew up in a low status community, in some places, East Village is a low status community. In other places, it's a high status community. What can people outside of low status communities do to support talent retention or
Mhm.
other strategies to develop communities? I feel like there's a whole rewiring of something that you're inviting us to think about. So,
Yeah, I mean, number one, part of it is like sort of inviting, the nonprofit industrial complex to practice what it preaches, because if you look at because I don't have an issue with nonprofits per se, but if you look frankly at the way that they've how they spend their money, and who they spend it on, to create these social benefits that their tax status gives them. People of color and folks in low status communities are definitely not funded the way they should be. They could be. I mean, there was a horrible report last year about for those groups that were working in climate justice that, almost something like less than 2% of them that were funded by all these huge foundations, less than 2% of them were led by people of color, like the people who are most affected by climate. So even their like funding policies are racist. And then you see, who gets the funding, and again, why are we surprised that their communities, that those communities that they say they're supporting, don't get any better? So I think in terms of, and even as far as like financing, to deal with the wealth gap that we're seeing, how can even the banking and finance industries, look at people who are in our own communities who want to do development work, are we actually supporting them to do it? Like, I talked in my book about, the first development project that I did, where my mortgage broker, and I had incredible credit, I'd actually already done, a small multifamily home before, had already approved for a loan, but my mortgage broker still insisted that I write a letter, basically declaring that I was a fine, upstanding citizen, because she wasn't sure that the underwriters would take my word for it.
yeah. Oof.
So it's kind of stuff like that, that we know still happens to this day.
Yeah.
So, and if you're ever in a position, where you can like either treat somebody from a low status community in a way that is respectful, and sort of, and meets them exactly where they are, which is usually often in a really good place, other than the fact they're from a low status community, then you can use your gifts, to recognize that there's things we can do, that are actually much more healing and supportive.
I was profiled the other day about a more, John and I have to move out of the church parsonage. They're
Mhm.
going to sell these parsonages, just deciding to sell them. And so, it's kind of tough. And we were thinking, well, I don't know if we really want to rent, let's see what we want to buy something. And we don't need to. We own our house in Jersey, but let's see. And so literally we were talking to this guy at Citibank, where we have like all our money and
Mhm.
some money in there. And when he asked me the question, do you want to tell me your race? I thought, I want to test this and see what it is. And I told him, and when he called me back, and we still got, a loan that we could do in a decentish rate, but his numbers on my credit, Majora, were absolutely not what I saw anywhere. Like not. And I sent him pictures of my credit report, and he had
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff about how those are wrong. And I was like, really? What? Nobody else thinks they're wrong. It's not the first time I've ever applied for it. It was crazy town. And I honestly thought, well, wow, it is a moment, how I'm an activist old lady too. So John and I are like, we might have to move our little money out of this bank. It was really quite, I called him to talk about it, the broker with the insurance money. And I was like, sir, can I show you what I see? Send him pictures. He literally was hostile. Oh yeah. And I was like, okay. And then I had to go, you really are experiencing this. Like you kind of thought it, but I really am experiencing Black woman talking to money giver.
Yep.
It was blew my mind.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It kind of blew my mind. So with my meat and status self, right? It kind
Yeah.
of blew my mind.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, and if you're going through this, if I'm going through this,
Right.
and like, like, no, look,
Right.
you look here,
Right.
but imagine,
Yes.
what other folks who who have actually not decided to drink our own Kool-Aid and be like, no, I'm going to show you who I am,
Right.
how much harder it is for them. And
Absolutely.
I think that's one of the reasons why I'm like, I gotta keep showing up,
Right.
because
Yeah,
like, you never know who's watching. Like your example can actually like literally save somebody's life.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And the faith you have in someone. I mean, this whole idea back to mirroring again, like there's generations of young people who have no idea of how shiny and beautiful and gifted they are and magical they are, and like really what they can do in the world. The world keeps kind of going, not really so much, but it's so important to change that narrative.
Exactly.
I bet you people have questions for you.
Oh.
Is that what we want to do, Kiana? She says that so like, do y'all have questions? And am I gonna call on the questions, or are you gonna do that, Kiana?
Let's see, since we have a small group tonight, we can have folks raise their hand using preferably the raise hand feature under reactions so that we see it. Or you can put it in the chat to all of us hosts. And Reverend, if you want to field them, that's great.
I'm happy to do that.
Great.
And especially if you raise, it's hard to see. So if you raise your hand, that's great. I'm gonna put myself on view of like gallery. There's everybody. Hello. Hi. So let's talk to Majora about reclaiming community. Who has a question or a comment on what you've heard?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we could just chat. I'd love that.
Me too. Okay. Hi, Ellen. Hi, Ellen.
Hi, how are you? I'll make a comment. And I just really want to thank you. First of all, I also want to add that I too am a member of Middle Church because I'm a big fan of yours. Much to Shirley's surprise, a member. but I really am a big fan of yours. And Majora, I worked for a number of years at Montefiore. I worked in the 80s at Monte, and then I went back in 2000 until I retired in 2016. And I've always wondered why the Bronx was not getting wealthier, or the developers, what I was seeing. I don't know anything near the granular nature of what you're talking about, but I finally understood what you're saying and why there hasn't been as much progress there. And I want to thank you. I can't wait to read the book, because it's something that I just really never understood. I knew people had invested, they just bought a property waiting for it to explode like it did in Long Island City or Astoria, and they weren't making the profit that they were expecting. And I didn't really understand why not, and now I do. And so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And the climate justice is the part that also really upsets me, because that's an area that I've worked in about asthma and medical aspects. And even at BJ, there was a period of time about environmental justice, really looking at the garbage and the moving of the garbage, and people from the South Bronx come and talk, and we learned about it and what was happening in the neighborhood. But it's really just a big challenge, and I really applaud what you're trying to do there. And I wondering how much support you feel from the community, or is it grow? I assume, based on what I've met from you tonight, that you're growing the community. So can you share a little bit more about the progress?
Sure. Yeah. So definitely, like, by putting myself, and really, this is my neighborhood. I mean, I literally live 2 blocks away from the house I grew up in. And, and we've certainly seen, lots of churn in terms of, it's really interesting, because the part of the Bronx that I'm in Hunts Point, we're still pretty poor. But much of the displacement that we experience here is actually poor people displacing other poor people. Because there's the way homeless shelter system work, and even very low income, affordable housing. It's another, I don't go too far into it in the book, but it's another very, very strange dynamic that is profit driven, no doubt. So, but what's been really interesting is that, it takes some time, our communities didn't get to the place that it is right now, overnight, and it's not going to go that the other way right away either. But what's been fascinating, is that by continuing and keep showing up, because that's what, flips people out the most. It's like many, especially in communities like this, they're kind of used to programs, happening and dropping in, and then someone does them, and then they're moved off or whatever. And, what I've been doing, and actually hopefully inspiring other folks to do, is give our community a second look. So opening up a cafe, and we just celebrated 5 years, and it's been quite a crazy road to get to the point where, where we are right now. But, but by creating those opportunities for people to sort of stop and give our community a second look, suddenly they're the ones doing the programming, in all of these places. So they're the ones hosting the open mics. They're the ones creating, the business meetings that are building small businesses here in the community. All we did was create the vessel that allowed folks to sort of place themselves in it, so that then they could look out and do the work that they didn't know they could do in their own community. Doesn't always mean that, when you try good stuff, that not everybody thinks it's great. Believe me, I certainly have my detractors. I call them in the book, my haters, I call them the Majora Carter fan club.
I love it.
Because I just don't like the idea of applying hate anywhere near me. So I'm like, they're not my haters, they're my fan club, because I really do think it's if you spend that much time and attention on me, you must love me in some way, shape, or form. So I'm gonna take it and be and I'm gonna pray up on you, and hopefully at some point things will change. And actually they have. Some people have actually recognized, I don't know what I was thinking, I'm sorry. It's all right. It's okay. I love you anyway. So, but yeah, we've been protested at times. We've had, and it was crazy. Honey, you should have seen it when we did the outdoor seating, during COVID, we were able to put, we did the open restaurants thing and actually did outdoor seating. One guy got so mad, he literally tried to like move it. It was the craziest thing. Now he loves us, but it was scary at the moment, just like be trying to argue with the guy and he didn't put a mask on. And I was like, no, but we're putting this thing here now because other people really like it too. And you're going to come around. And eventually he did. It was nice.
Thank you, Majora. I like the way you circle back. I like the way you circle back to your faith too. I mean, Sonia, your hand was up.
Yes, hi. I first want to say that I'm so impressed and heartened with this dialogue and with your work, Majora, and just to give you a sense of where I'm coming from, I'm 73 and I have a master's in early childhood education from Bank Street. I have a doctorate in school psychology, and I spent some time traveling throughout the greater New York area, testing students in the public school system who were in special education. They were in special ed, and these tests that I was administering were 3-year follow-ups on these kids who already had been in the system for at least 3 years. And I was pretty conscientious. I would look at the old records. I saw that there was so little movement. But if you open your eyes, which I think, Jackie, you mentioned something ethical about opening your eyes, just walking around communities, seeing how people carry themselves, seeing how the young people came to my office and the drawings that they made of a person and what weakness, was conveyed by those drawings, and just knowing that human beings are valuable, every one of us, and so it was really depressing. Another memory that comes to mind is when I was the school psychologist at the Little Red Schoolhouse some years ago. And that was, a well-known progressive school. But at the time, this was in the early 90s, it wasn't so long ago, a little girl, a Black girl, had been admitted to the first grade. She was the only Black child in this class. And there wasn't the kind of preparation for her, for her family, for the Little Red community. There was, I think people just thought, we'll do the liberal thing and plop her into, this white progressive. Anyway, that comes to mind. I want to get more positive, and with your energy and with the hopefulness of your projects. I'm so impressed, and I'm impressed too with this extraordinary language, which is, and it sounds like there must be something kind of in the air, kind of even academic about it. This is the language, poverty maintenance. That's so right on. Low status communities, that's completely right on. Third spaces, nonprofit industrial complex. I mean, the language that you're using, it comes from a community that you're a part of now, right? You're not doing this on your own. You're doing it with others, and it's just, as I keep saying, it's really heartening. I don't know how much I can do to to contribute to the work that you're doing, but I just want to say I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed, and I'm so glad. I'm so happy. So happy this is happening.
Oh, thank you. So keep talking about the book, encourage people to read it, and and there are low status communities everywhere. They're in inner cities, they're Rust Belt towns that are all white. I mean, they're Native American reservations, and you're right, all of us.
And I think of the book Caste, I guess it's obvious association.
Yep.
Low statuses among people of color,
Yeah.
I mean, anyway, it's
Thank
very,
you for
very
sharing.
rich. Very
Thank
rich.
you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Sonia.
You're welcome.
Julie, I saw your hand.
Hi, Reverend Jackie. Hi, Majora. Thank you so much for being here and being part of our extended conversation on justice issues this year. Majora, I just to introduce myself, I'm Rabbi Shuli Passo. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at BJ. I work closely with Kiana and also with Cheryl Parker at the Marlene Meyerson JCC. Majora, I guess this is a question for both of you, but particularly you, Majora. I feel like there is a lot of talk in different justice spaces around the need to either abolish capitalism or reinvent capitalism and the challenges of the capitalist system. And it seems like you're talking about the cafe and real estate development, and you're using the tools of capitalism in a positive way. And I'm wondering, I would just be so curious to hear your reflections on that. Do you think of your work in those terms? Do you talk about capitalism in a way do you envision capitalism in a way that's more palatable for those of us who see the dark side of it? And just any reflections on that?
Sure. Well,
hear.
hopefully soon. Well, I'm actually going to be speaking about capitalism, at the TED conference coming up this April. And it's in a section called User Era, which I think is really interesting. And so basically it's a bunch of us giving our takes on capitalism. And look, I think many people smarter than I will ever be, have tried to dismantle it. And I'm like, good on you, try, keep somebody who can do it. But in the meantime, I think I look back at the fact that yes, the same capitalist system that created and used slavery also created Black Wall Streets.
Right.
It's not, so capitalism's a tool, right? And its benefits as well as its atrocities have been unevenly applied. And that's where I think, we could be using it in a much more fruitful tool, as a tool that could be useful. And that's the kind of thing where it's like, yes, I am totally, interested in using the vehicles and the strategies that are available. It's one of the reasons why I looked at, the business community as I think about communities. It's like, like we don't retain the talent in low status communities. Like we encourage it to leave. And that comes at a net loss for the people in our communities from, they're not buying the property or holding on to it. They're not creating wealth within those communities. That they're at the positive example that's there is which not there. It's like, why do we do that? So I think there were definitely valuable lessons. Like I think, one of them would be if philanthropy, literally, if they could act as the same kind of predatory speculators that are going into those communities and buying up property, if philanthropy did that and just held on to property and paid people for it at fair market value so that somebody from those communities can actually buy that property. I mean, it's a stable investment. Philanthropy can do that. To be a philanthropic organization, you only have to put 5% of your corpus into, and then say that you're a philanthropic organization. And there's tons of them that could easily do that. And it could transform the way that our communities are losing wealth because so many of us just don't know what to do with it. And we're easy prey, for predatory speculators who can offer fast cash deals for folks. I think there's, the SEC, could create, low-income homeowners and property owners, could make them a protected class, if they wanted to. but they've done it for other things.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of things we could do using capitalism, the tools that are embedded in it.
Thank you. I can't wait to hear your TED Talk.
Me either. I'm not quite finished writing it, but
I can't wait either. Just to comment on what Majora is saying right there, Shuli, it was a great question, Rabbi. It really is, what is the world we want? I mean, it really, really is. What is the world we want? I really appreciated Wilkerson's book cast. I really appreciate Majora's vision. Do we want a world in which poor people are no longer poor? I don't think so. It doesn't seem like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, doesn't seem like it. Cheryl, you have a question or comment?
I have both.
Okay.
First, I want to thank you both. In my role as the director of the Joseph Stern Center for Social Responsibility at the JCC, I have the opportunity to sit in on a lot of talks like this one. And this is really special. And so I just want to thank you both for that. And it strikes me that one of the reasons that it's really special is we're here tonight talking about communities. And you both are, deeply engaged in your communities. You're both part of a faith-based community. And so are all of us.
Right.
And so I guess my question is really, and what about that? What are there opportunities here for communities to work together? We talked before about the power of individuals to help one another, right? But what is the power of communities to work together towards some of the goals you're talking about, Majora?
Oh, I mean, I think I got it where I think one of the reasons why I was attracted to Middle to begin with, because it just seemed like this seamless way, of just like living, following, the gospel, that, and having this example, through Jesus's life of like what community, like how community looked, like it is love, period.
Love, period.
And it was just like, everybody's included in that, whether or not, they go to church with you or what. It's just like, if your job is to love, then that's what you do. So that kind of example literally helped me. It really just reinforced the things that I was doing. I was like, oh my gosh, like, okay, I finally got something right. That's what it felt like. And so so I believe that, if that expanding of the tent, so because all of us that are interested, in all communities actually being seen for how beautifully, God made us all, then then you just show it in your actions, right? And that's how you work together. So I think the kind of support that I've seen, I think in particular, Jackie's example of like, just how, like the consistent building from both inside and outside, has really inspired me to see how that's how you do community building. It's like, I see you, how can I help you? What do you need? And I'm going to be there for you. And putting that forward, really, it's just showing what love is.
I get chills when you say it that way, but it's really true. And I'm just going to celebrate Majora and the work she's done. But I do think that there is something, forgive me, almost autonomic about the human species, almost, that we forget. I'm kind of going back to that. Like, I think we see it when Sandy happens or Katrina happens. Like, you see it if you're in a crowd on the street and a person's reading their phone and steps into traffic, you will grab them by the elbow and pull them back in. I think it's in us. And I think we like quickly get another message about survival being an individual, right? But it's not. Right. You can be all right, but you're not really going to thrive,
No.
By yourself. So I do think that there's something magical about when you know that. I mean,
yeah,
whatever it is that is the thing that makes you know that, and then like the rest of your life, you're like, oh, it has has to be that, right? It has to be, you complete me. It has to be,
Yes.
right, Majora? Like it has to be, like y'all, Middle had a fire. This is my story.
Yeah.
Tell this story and let go back to Majora, but we had a fire. December 5th, 2020. Holy cow. 6 alarms burning down the sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
Traumatizing.
Yeah.
And while my people were watching the fire,
Mm-hmm.
they saw the ladies outside at the building next door in their slippers and they're smoking, and holy cow, because they were smoked out of their building. And they started taking them shopping. Like, I'm not talking Kmart down the street. I'm talking like they took them to Midtown shopping because they couldn't do anything about the fire, but they could do something about that. Like that's in us.
Yep.
How do we remember it? How do we remember the future?
Yep.
Right? How do we remember that?
Yeah. Yeah. Give people opportunity to know that they can afford to be generous and gracious when their needs are taken care of. It's real easy to be like, okay, I can do this. I mean, I do think it's really interesting. And if you're just speaking about philanthropy one more time, that like the large, like, even though there's like, yes, tons and tons of huge foundations, but percentage wise, poor people are like proportionally like the biggest givers.
Right.
And it's just like that says something, I think, because it's like folks are feeling like they want to be generous, and they are. I just feel like we've got to give people more reasons to do so, like right where they are. And even when it doesn't look like they're willing to pay attention, you keep doing it, it does work. It does.
Oh my gosh, I hope that's true. I feel it's true. I'm so grateful for this time in these Zoom squares with y'all.
I know.
Majora, like, I'm going to come and kidnap you.
No, you already got me.
I want to just, I have so
I'll
much
come willingly.
Come hang out with me a little bit by the church. We can talk some trash about it. Can I just invite you all just to thank Majora in the ways that you would, like with some snaps or some claps or some, emojis or whatever they are down here. I'm going to give her a celebration one for being a human being, for being a human, like she's a human. And we're all on our way to these holiest of holy days. Easter and Passover are going to come some close together this year, but it's almost the same day. I think it's the same weekend, Friday and the Saturday and the Sunday. And it just makes me think about all of our teachers, the prophets who've gone before us to dare to say, thus says the Lord, to kind of have pictures of a way a world can be. And this universalist, albeit follower of Rabbi Jesus, loves the book of Zechariah, which is just a book, right? But that 8th chapter that I like to paraphrase, where it's like, one of these days, there's going to be this city, and there's going to be these children playing in the streets, and these old folks sitting on the porch, rocking in the chairs, and it'll feel safe, and it'll feel good, and it'll feel whole and well. And that is my prayer for all of us, to participate in the healing of the world, in the Tikkun Olam. And I want to thank you, Majora, for showing us so many beautiful ways to do it. And thank you all for the incredible work you do in the world. And may G-D and all the goodness of the universe shine light upon us as we try to make a world a better place.
Amen.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful.
Thank you for inviting us. Majora, put anything in the chat that you want people to see.
Yeah.
Take a second, and I'm going to put just Fierce Love in the chat. If you guys are curious about that's the name of the book. And we're at middlechurch.org.
Yeah.
Trying to be good in the world. And we're so grateful to connect with you.
Here, this is I'm just putting my website in because that's the best way.
Okay.
My book is on it. And also that's a good way to get in touch with me as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Majora.
Thank you. Take good care. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.